Okay, I have to admit, this one is hitting different than I was expecting. Now, don't get it twisted, I mean, there is room for criticism with this show, I think especially on the production side of things. This isn't the best animated show of the season, but I'm of the belief and thought process that as long as the show doesn't look ugly to look at, even if maybe there's a little slideshow animation here and there, if they're doing great with the story and characters and I'm not appalled at looking at the show, then that's more important than anything. And this show, I am honestly surprised. I was pretty positive with my first impressions, don't get it mistaken, but I wasn't expecting it to be the best of the season or something that would make me say, I kinda wish more shows in that adventurer realm would do what I'm seeing here, but that's exactly what this show's doing. There's a lot of little moments that are what makes this so interesting to me right now. It's not one idea like, ooh, I didn't expect to kill him that way, or ooh, I didn't expect a backstory in that way. It's the little moments from how, when you hear of characters going slime hunting, every slime and their mother looks like Rimuru these days. And how do you kill slimes? Well, you cut them in half, or you blast them with a fireball. This show, they just go inside their stomachs and rip out a crystal and it melts into a puddle. And I'm like, you didn't need to make it different, but it makes those scenes a little more interesting. When you think you're about to get like a big boss battle with slimes, instead it's a little annoying that it got on your face as she rips the slime goo off. And yes, I know that sounds worse than I just meant, but still, you get my point. But it's the way they're going about the distrust. So you have 4 characters who, like I said in my first video for this show, they basically feel like they could be their own light novel protagonists in terms of how they got thrown out of their party or thrown out of their life, and now they're pretty distrustful. So you have nowhere else to go, and you have Nick, of all characters, who I wasn't expecting much from, and I think it's pretty clear he's definitely keeping some secrets given that he's a lot stronger than he's letting on. But the fact of the matter is, they come into this episode and says, we have 3 rules. Hey, we're going to be careful with money, we're going to not get in the way of other people's hobbies, and we're going to come back alive. Immediately, they're starting to do some pushback, like, okay, so you're going to be the accountant, and, you know, so-and-so is going to overcheck to make sure the money lines up, and they basically call each other out, and Nick's like, yes, this is important. If we have distrustful natures, we need to bring this up. And just the fact that you have a party of 4 who, I've seen plenty of shows, whether funny or more serious, where people are down on their luck, they don't trust, and they join a party, and while they don't trust each other immediately, I don't think there's as much logic than what this second episode just did. These characters don't hate humanity, they don't hate everyone and their mother, but they definitely have some scars that they are hiding from one another and maybe even themselves that they don't want to admit to. But here's the thing, when you wake up after a drunken adventure, and you know, well, am I going to be able to pay for a room the next night? Or am I going to survive on my own? Here's people who have their own problems. It makes more sense to make a guild together, and not only is the composition of said guild really solid, also, they just have a lot more in common than they might realize at first. And to see an episode that does have some action, some cool action, and other action that is just kind of like, hey, here's a character sliding across the screen and attacking. But the fact of the matter was, there is so much realism for a bunch of adventurers who have had such a bad hand dealt in life, and to see them basically push back, I mean, I think one of the best moments, if not the best moment we've seen out of these 2 episodes, is initially when you have Tiana as well as Curran, who more or less, like, she ends up summoning some ice shards and it almost hits our dragon girl. Now, that is basically a no-no. Immediately, it's like, hey, you better watch your back, I might accidentally swing my sword and your head might come off, and it's a little hostile. But by the end of the episode, the fact that she doesn't look back and is able to run towards this ogre and swarm of goblins, and the ice shards go around her, it doesn't hit her. The fact that there is that level of trust, not in the way that they immediately are buddy-buddy best friends, there's never going to be them butting heads, but it's enough to say, in battle, I can trust my back to her after basically thinking they were about to throw hands. And those little moments, like I said, it's all the little moments throughout this episode that make it into a worthwhile character-driven series. I'm not here to say it's the best of the season. I'm not here to say it's the best show I've ever seen. What I am here to say, though, is it is hitting different than so many shows with that adventure party dynamic that I've seen in a couple of years. And I am really, really impressed with what I'm seeing. Now, I do have a full live reaction to today's episode if you do want to take a look. Usually I'd say it at the beginning, but I was just so immersed in talking about this one I almost forgot. So So yeah, it's over on Patreon if you're interested. But the show, it's interesting. I think there's so many little details that I know a lot of people find boring, especially when it comes to video games. I can think of like stuff like Red Dead Redemption. When it comes to hunting and like harvesting materials, there's people who are like, if you've never played those games, a lot of times when it comes to like carving the animals and stuff, there's a lot of blood that will splatter on the screen, and more or less like it's something that people constantly are like, if I could always skip these types of moments, I would. Me, it just adds to the immersion. If I'm going to hunt in a video game, I want the full package, right? So for these characters to, you know, the way they harvest slime crystals, you don't need to go into this hardcore maniac mode of fighting. You can literally just go inside you just put your finger into a slime and then you rip out its crystal. It's kind of savagely brutal when you think of it. Or the fact that when they harvest both the ogre's horns as well as the goblin's ears. Usually when you kill monsters in these shows, they kind of disintegrate and they drop an item, right? Like that's typically how video games do it too, right? But I think it makes a lot more sense more often than not. I'm not saying I always would want to see this, but I do wish more shows would do this, of seeing someone take a knife and carve around the horn and struggle to pull the horn free, or there's a bunch of just little moments like that. It just makes it feel more realistic than them just being, we're super powerful warriors, we do a fire sword attack and we pick up a gem. That could happen. You could maybe destroy a dragon, but the fact that it seems more likely that if they ever fought a dragon that they would actually carve off scales, those little moments, they add to that realism that the show's trying to go for. And I think even though the production may not be the sharpest thing around, like some scenes feel animated more than others, like there's literally moments where characters will slide across the screen, or they won't animate, they'll just show a classic picture that will kind of get across what they're doing. But I think where the show does get production right is in the more simplistic scenes. It's a pretty consistent art style. I like looking at the character designs. I think the world's fascinating and beautiful at times to witness, but it's the little moments, like initially when Tiana goes over to apologize, she like bends over and the way her hair falls into her face. There's little moments throughout the episode that do have some more attention to detail, which maybe people will say, well, I would much prefer seeing a well-animated sword attack than characters' hair falling in their face. But when you look at the action that we did get, while there's definitely some nitpick moments that even for myself, I'm like, I wish that was better, I still say in general, watching them cut apart some goblins or seeing the mixture of their attacks, hell, when Zem ends up boosting our two warriors, even the glow effect that he does on these two characters, like it's different than the typical glow effects from any sort of priest or mage that buffs characters in shows like these. So the fact that we have a series that instead of being like, the focus is going to be on the next action moment, it's no, the focus is on this party of four who all have their secrets, who all have their distrust, and they want to trust one another, but they're not stupid about it. And to have a character like Nick who just like strips down except his pants because he's not trying to scare him away, but says, this is my armor, this is my equipment, this is my skill. It does seem like he's hiding some truths there, or maybe it's just due to his own issues of maybe he doesn't think he's as good as he is just because of where he came from. I don't know. But there's a lot to really appreciate about this episode. And I honestly went from thinking the first episode, good, intriguing plot line in terms of taking four characters that felt like they were their own protagonists and had their own reason to be distrustful. But an episode like this really makes me say, this hits different. There's so many little aspects that really add together to make something feel like it's not just here to show the next action scene, or it's just here to show the next shocking revenge plotline. Instead, it's about four people rekindling, regrouping, and trying to find peace in life after seemingly losing it all, and finding out they have a lot more similarities than anything else. But yeah, I leave episode 2 of this honestly very impressed. I think there will be a lot of talk about maybe production, or maybe people say it's not as exciting as they want, but as someone who loves slow burn and characterization first and foremost, this is exactly what I wanted to see, and honestly I think will be one of the more bigger surprises for people, especially since it airs on a Tuesday. But thoughts and feelings yourself down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. Like I mentioned, full live reaction is available on the Patreon, and while you're there, why don't you get yourself a video shout out like a few we're about to get here. So we got Blue Knight, Dark Lord, and Zeshram. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.